The latest YouGov CAR26 poll, 57% of people want to delay or cancel the ban on sales of new petrol and diesel vehicles from 2030.
Director of CAR26, Lois said the poll showed that government policy on net zero is completely out of touch with the public, and we're delighted to say that she joins us now to tell us more. So tell us more about this poll. Who's taken part of the poll? What did they say? Was there age differences in it, geographic differences in it? Tell us who's taken part.
Well, there was about 1,500 people that were polled by YouGov across all the age ranges, and Brexiteers and Remainers and everybody, basically. And, yeah, 57% of those expressed an opinion want to either delay or cancel the ban. So nobody wants it. Well, people do want it, but the vast majority don't want it. But what was very interesting, Esther, was that young people who previously have been really pro the ban coming in 2030, that's actually dropped from last year, 72%. To 51% this year. Now, we're being constantly told that young people are really pro-net zero and they love it, and this is showing that that's not the case at all. I mean,
Why do you think it's moved so significantly in the last year, and why do you think it's lots of young people who are now saying, oh, rethink these policies?
Well, I think young people are seeing the impact. You know, they're seeing that the cost of living is going up and it's actually impacting on them. Young people live on electronic devices, and the price of electricity is going absolutely through the roof because we don't frack. We pay 8 times more for our electricity. But I actually think that there's a bit of a disconnect between what the mainstream media tell us and what's actually happening in real life. We're being constantly told by the BBC certain things about everybody loving net zero, but actually I don't think it's the case in the real world. Our polling...
and probably who they're listening to. I mean, that's it, isn't it? Everybody has a self-selective audience.
Absolutely.
And if they're not absolutely tapping into all the regions, all the people, all sort of socio-economic backgrounds, this is the disparity here in the results, isn't it?
No, absolutely. And if you look at our polling last week that we did with regards to a net zero referendum, it's actually 62% want a net zero referendum. And again, 56% of young people 18 to 24 last year wanted a net zero referendum, and that went up this year to 78%. We're not hearing that at all, are we? It's ridiculous.
I mean, I agree. I think the silent majority realise that net zero is futile, and because of what's happening around the world, it won't make any difference. But on this referendum thing, I mean, what question would you ask in a referendum?
Well, you could certainly ask the question, should we have a pause on net zero policies whilst there's a cost-benefit analysis being carried out, because that actually hasn't been done at all. It's ridiculous. And also, while China are building coal-fired power stations, why should we be pursuing net zero policies at all?
I mean, I agree. I mean, I voted against the Climate Change Act in 2008.
Good for you.
So it's all this,
Maybe that could be the question. Should we revoke the Climate Change Act?
But what I don't understand about the referendum thing is, if you say, you know, should we have net zero, and people vote no in a referendum,
yeah,
the bit I don't understand is what then the government is mandated to do. Because if you then wanted to pursue a policy, not because of net zero, but for some other reason that would reduce carbon emissions, would they be banned from doing so because the public had voted against a net zero?
Well, then you could have, as part of the question, whether CO2 reduction policies should be pursued at all. That could be part of the question, whether that should actually be the end goal in actual fact at all, because our organisation doesn't believe that CO2 has any negative impact on the environment or climate change whatsoever. But what I think this will do, it will encourage debate. There's been no debate whatsoever. There's been no scientists debating each other on television. There's been nothing at all.
I think that's what I was going to ask you. Whilst you're saying the headline is, we want a referendum, is it really a referendum, or is it just greater conversation and understanding if you go for this policy in a short time frame, the consequences of this? A bit like we'll be speaking to Professor Cole Hennigan a bit later. Did people really know the downsides of lockdown? You're saying the same thing. Do people really know the downsides of this policy? So it won't be a referendum. It's just stop and pause and think what you're doing.
Absolutely. Stop, pause and reflect, and actually have a look at the science and allow the science to be debated. I mean, the BBC actually have a policy that there's not allowed to be any debate whatsoever on anything to do with the climate science. And we all know from COVID that modelling is totally way out a lot of the time. This whole thing has been based on modelling. And if they push us all into electric vehicles, if you actually look at what's going on in Switzerland at the moment, they've announced yesterday that electric cars are going to be banned from the roads when there's power shortages or when, there's pressure on the grid.
So it's Lois, you brought a brilliant point to the forefront, and I think understanding what we're heading towards is really important.
I think the public are way ahead of politicians on this, as they usually are.
Yeah, absolutely, like with Brexit.
Exactly, absolutely. And so thank you for joining us and putting these issues out there for people to hear. I'm sure lots of people agree with you.
And I'm sure they'll be emailing us in. Well, we've all been gifted the